So, we are live on Facebook. We are live on YouTube. Welcome to another episode of Story Time with me, your host, Brett Corney. Tonight, we read Russian fairy tales, and with Russian stories, as always, of course, you need drink. It's man's drink. So, I have beer here. It is Joseph's Bra Dunkelweizen Amber Unfiltered Wheat Beer. Well, see how this is unfiltered, like man, yes. So here we go. See how it is. I suppose I can pour it into wine glass. Yes, would that be manly? Would that be manly? Pouring it into wine glass. Well, obviously you're on Facebook if you just commented on Facebook. Regardless, looks like I've got one viewer on YouTube and at least one on Facebook as well. We will get started momentarily. I've never drank beer out of wine glass, but it's what I have here, so we see how this goes. Oh yes. This looks rather dark for a wheat beer. Unfiltered, but still. Not used to wheat ales. Oh yes, and I can see the yeast and such floating around inside. Amber. Oh, it's an amber wheat. I've never had one of these. I've had amber wheat. Looking forward to it. It's got the caramely smell on the head, on the nose rather. It looks rather good. I'm prepared. I'm ready. So anyway, switching back to the regular voice. It is so late for story time anyway. Oh, yes, that's delightful. That's nice. I like it. Anyway, tonight we read some Russian fairy tales. In addition to those Russian fairy tales, we'll read a story of my own. It is 11:20 instead of 10 o'clock, so I understand if I don't have nearly as many viewers because it's an hour and 20 minutes off of my regular time. So that's kind of odd. It really is. Regardless, I will go ahead and share the link in the comments section. That way you can also share the link, and I will be sure page so that other people can follow as well. Live, telling some stories. Shit. For you guys. There we are. So now it looks like there are two people currently watching on Facebook. What an exciting day today. Glad to see that. Glad to know that. Maybe it's counting me. I don't know. Regardless, we are now live on both Facebook and YouTube. It looks like I've got a couple viewers on each, which makes me a happy camper. I guess we can go ahead and get the show and get this party started. The show must go on. And beginning it all off, I've got my beer. I hope you have one too, and we can cheers. In the meantime, let us move forward and read some of Russia's old tales. Right. This next one is a long one. You know, we left off last night on a pretty long one. This one's even longer. It's the longest one we've read yet. It's called No, Not, and let me show you there is an illustration on the very top of the first page of this story. Here it is. There's the illustration for you. I hope it I don't think it has to make sense for you. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but I hope you like it. And now, let us get started with the story. No, not. In a certain village, not far, not near, not high, and not low, there lived an old man and his 3 sons. Oh, here we go again with the 3 sons. Grishka and Mishka, and the third, Vanyushka. This may be the story I've been thinking about. I really hope that it is, but it's not entirely possible. I've thought about it. I've thought it was a story before, and it wasn't, but we will see. Vanyushka was neither clever nor wise, but sharp as a needle. Work he did not, but all of the time he lay on the stove. Oh, what is with this third son laying on the stove again? Vanyushka, Vanyushka. He wore his sides off lying there. And said to his brothers, Hey, you old fools, open the door. I want to go forth, I know not where. And he began to importune his father and mother. Give me my share. I renounce my claim on what is left to my brothers. Do, do, do. Left to my brother. Where was that? Yes, to my brothers. The old man yielded to his entreaty and gave him 300 rubles. Vanyushka took the money, bowed to his parents, hurried out of the village, arrived in the capital, and began to roam about the city, frequenting inns, regaling himself, and gathering all the drunkards about him. The drunkards asked him, "What is your name?" He said, "Truly, brothers, I know not. When the priest baptized me and gave me my name, I was young and stupid. For that reason, he was nicknamed Know Not." Oh, so that's where the title comes from. All right, let's see where this goes. I don't believe it's the story I was thinking of, sadly, but that's okay. I think Vanyushka is the name in the story I'm thinking of, though, so there may be a future Vanyushka. Anyway, going on. Know Not spent all his money in revels with the drunkards and began to wonder, poor wretch that he was, how he would live and avoid utter misery. He went to some cattle dealers and offered to hire himself to them. "What do you want for wages?" they asked. Know Not thought to himself that bread stays put, but money rolls away, and answered, "I don't want wages in money. Only let me eat my fill and drink till I'm drunk. I won't ask you for anything, nor will you ask me for anything." The cattle dealers agreed to this readily, for a worker who wanted no money was much to their liking. Straightway they signed the bond, making it formal and legal. Know Not was delighted with his free bread and wine. He began to live a gay life. Every day he got drunk and lay in his stupor. As soon as he woke, he fell upon the wine again and passed hours with the bottle, never working. When ordered to work, he would say, "Begone! Why do you bother me? Did we not agree that you should let me eat my fill and drink till I was drunk, that I would not ask anything of you, nor you of me?" When his term was up, the cattle dealers were glad to get rid of him. "We have lost our bread and wine," they said, "and will be lucky if he does not sue us in court." That's a shit deal for the cattle dealers. I'm being a little explicit tonight, pardon me for that, but it's something that's happening, so I hope you're okay with it. From the cattle dealers, Know Not went to the Tsar's gardeners and hired himself out as a watchman. The gardeners quickly made an agreement with him on the same basis as the cattle dealers, not to pay anything for his work, but to give him his fill of food and drink. Know Not was supposed to watch the gardens, but he caroused by night and by day, and was never sober. On one night, all the gardeners happened to be out, and Know Not decided to replant the apple trees, the grapevines, and the shrubs. The Tsar had 3 daughters. The 2 elder ones were resting, but the youngest one sat among the flowers and did not sleep all night. She saw Know Not ruin the garden, displaying his strength, tearing out old trees by their roots and flinging them over the fence. Next morning the gardeners came to work and began to shout and swear. "What kind of fool are you? You cannot watch anything. Who did it?" "I know not." They seized him like a thief and brought him before the Tsar. Know Not found himself in the Tsar's palace, crossed himself as is prescribed, saluted as he had been taught, came close, bowed low, stood erect, and spoke boldly. "Your Majesty, your gardens were not laid out in good order. It is no calamity that the trees were uprooted and flung over the fence. Give me permission to repair everything. I will do whatever is necessary." "Sure you will, Know Not. I know not that you will." The Tsar gave him permission, and the next night Know Not set about putting the gardens in order. A tree that 20 men could not lift, he would pick up with one hand. By morning all the gardens were ready, laid out in order. The Tsar called Know Not before him, poured him a cup of wine, and Know Not took the cup in his right hand and drank it down one gulp. After that, he took out 3 apples and presented them to the princesses. To the eldest daughter, he gave an overripe one, to the second, a ripe one, and to the youngest, a green one. The Tsar saw this and realized that his princesses were of age, that the eldest should long since have been married, that the second one's time had come, and that even the youngest had not long to wait. On that very day he gathered together his dukes and boyars and his wise counselors. They began to ponder how to marry off 3 princesses. At last they thought of a plan. They printed official edicts and sent them with messengers to all the sovereign nations, announcing that their Tsar desired to give his daughters in marriage, and that suitors from every country should come to his court. And so emperors, sons and kings, and mighty champions gathered together in the Tsar's court, and the Tsar gave them a great feast. All the suitors ate their fill and drank their fill, and sat there drunken and gay. The Tsar ordered his daughters to dress in many-colored garments, came out of their private apartments and choose come out of their private apartments and choose their future husbands, each according to her heart's desire. The princesses, dressed in many-colored garments, came forth to look at the suitors, stood near them, and curtsied politely. These maidens were stately of form and agile in mind. Their eyes were as bright as the falcons, their brows as black as the sables. They poured cups of green wine and passed along the rows to choose their bridegrooms. The eldest daughter gave her cup to an emperor's son. The middle one gave hers to a king's son, but the youngest one carried her cup up and down the rows, then put it on the table, and said to her father, father, my sovereign, there is no groom for me here. Ah, my beloved daughter, most valiant knights are here. Is there nevertheless none to your liking? After the feast, the guests departed. Again, the Tsar assembled the sons of dukes, boyars, and wealthy merchants, and ordered his youngest daughter to dress in a many-colored garment and choose a bridegroom. She dressed, came forth, poured a cup of green wine, walked along the rows, put the cup on the table, curtsied before her father, and said, father, my sovereign, there is no groom to my liking here. Her father answered, my fussy daughter, from among what men will you choose a groom? Since you are so minded, I will now gather together burghers and peasants, simpletons and drunkards, buffoons, stage dancers and singers. From among them you shall choose your husband, whether you like it or not. The Tsar sent his edict to all the town, villages, and hamlets. At his court there assembled a great multitude of burghers and peasants, not hamburgers, but burghers, burghers, and peasants, and fools and drunkards, buffoons, stage dancers, and singers, among whom was also No Not. The princess, dressed in a many-colored garment, came forth to the palace entrance, and beheld the lowly crowd. She saw No Not. In stature, he was taller than everyone else. He was stouter of body, too, and his curls fell over his shoulders like pure gold. She came close to him, curtsied low, gave him the loving cup, and said these words, Drink, my betrothed, you will perform every task. No Not received the cup in his right hand, drank it down in one gulp, took the princess by her white hands, kissed her on her sweet lips, and together they went to the Tsar himself. The Tsar then ordered all of his son-in-laws to celebrate their weddings. They celebrated their weddings and feasted in their feasts, and soon the princesses began to live happily with their husbands. Absorbed in these weddings, the Tsar forgot to recall his messengers, who had continued on their way, summoning suitors from still other foreign lands. When the messengers reached the Saracen kingdom, they issued a call in the marketplaces and at the fairs and announced the Tsar's edict. Oh, what's going to happen now? And so, 3 brothers gathered together, valiant warriors, mighty champions who had traveled in many lands and conquered many kingdoms. First, the youngest brother set out on his way, followed by a vast army. He approached the Tsar's capital and learned that the princesses were already married. He grew wrathful and sent a threatening letter to the Tsar, saying, I came from the Saracen kingdom with peaceful intentions to woo your daughters. For that purpose I have traveled through many lands and provinces. Now I find that you have given your daughters in marriage and failed to recall your messengers. Therefore, pay me for the damage and expenses I have suffered. If you do not, I shall burn this whole city, slay all the people, and put you yourself, despite your great age, to a cruel death. Then the Tsar said, well, that's not good, is it? Pardon me. Then the Tsar said, excuse me, sorry for that. Sorry you had to bear witness to that. Then the Tsar said, "My beloved sons-in-law, what shall we do?" The emperor's son and the king's son answered, "We do not fear this threat. We shall ourselves battle the champions. Assemble a host of troops, father, and the mounted guard as well." Thereupon a considerable army assembled. The emperor's son gathered the infantry regiments, the king's son the mounted regiments. Both went out to the open field, beheld the valiant warrior, the mighty champion took fright. Beheld the valiant warrior, the mighty champion, took fright and fled to their country estates beyond thick forests and swampy marshes, so that nobody could find a trace of them. Their regiments were left leaderless, helpless, and fearful of Judgment Day. No Not lay on the stove, and his heroic heart boiled with rage. He said to his wife, "My beloved wife, let us go to the country. Any time now the city may be burned, the people slain, and your own father taken captive. We are not responsible for this affair. We are guiltless of this disaster." "No," answered the Tsar's daughter, "I would rather die than leave my father and mother." She said farewell to No Not and went to her father on the balcony. The Tsar stood on the balcony watching the field of battle through a spyglass. No Not, dressed as a peasant, donned a cap and a caftan and mittens, went out of the city unseen and unknown, came to a high hill and shouted a heroic shout and whistled a warlike whistle. At his call there galloped from the open field a good steed bearing a full suit of armor. From his mouth a flame streamed, from his ears rolled curls of smoke, from his nostrils sparks flew. The steed's tail was 3 cubits long, and his mane reached to his hoofs. 3 cubits, that's a long, long tail. No Not the simpleton came closer and put on the horse saddlecloths, blankets, and a Circassian saddle. He tightened the 12 saddle girths and laid the 13th over the chest. The girths were of white silk, the buckles of red gold, and the clamps of steel, not for beauty's sake, but for heroic strength. For silk does not tear, steel does not bend, and red gold does not rust in the ground. He himself donned all the warlike accoutrements: iron mail, a steel shield, a long spear, a battle mace, and a sharp sword. He mounted his good steed and lashed him on his slender flanks, cutting his flesh to the white bone. The steed flew into a passion and raised himself from the damp earth, higher than the tall standing trees, only lower than the moving clouds. He began to leap, and each leap measured a verst. What is it with versts? They are so long. From beneath his mighty hooves, enormous clumps of earth were dug up. Underground springs gushed into the air. The water in the lakes surged forth and mixed with the yellow sand, and the trees in the forest shook and bent in the ground. This is one mighty steed, dear listeners. No Not shouted a mighty shout, whistled a warlike whistle, and the wild beasts on chains began to roar. The nightingales in the gardens began to sing, and the snakes and adders began to hiss. Such was No Not's ride. He rode past the Tsar's palace, past the front entrance, and cried, "Hail, great sovereign, with all your royal retinue!" He jumped over the white stone walls and the corner towers into the open field where stood the host of troops and the mountain guards, and cried, "Hail, men, where are your leaders?" And in the open field he beheld the valiant warrior, the mighty champion, galloping on his good steed, taking wing like an eagle, casting terror into the host of troops. No Not shouted in a shrill voice like a loud trumpet, and the two warriors rode toward each other, raising their iron maces that weighed each 2,000 pounds. Damn! Trying to outman each other. That's impressive. 2,000-pound maces. Quite. When they came together, the shock of mail on mail was like a mountain avalanche. Their maces clashed and broke. Only the staffs remained in their hands. Once more they jumped far apart in the open field, wheeled their good steeds around, and rode again to meet in one place. They thrust their spears together, and the spears bent to the handles and could not pierce the mail. But now the Saracen champion wavered in his saddle. Once more they rode apart in the open field, and when they met for the third time, they struck each other with their sharp swords, and No Not knocked the second knight out of the saddle onto the damp earth. In the foe's eyes the light grew dim, from his mouth and nose blood began to flow. No Not jumped from his steed, pressed the hero to the damp earth, drew from his pocket an enormous dagger, a steel knife that weighed 60 pounds, cut open the coloured garment of the Saracen knight, bared his white breast, searched for his fiery heart, shed his hot blood, and destroyed his heroic strength. Damn, son! Then he cut off the rash head, lifted it on his spear, and cried in a mighty voice, "Oh, my beloved friends, come out, sons-in-law, come out of the thickets and take command of your armies. They are all safe and sound." Then No Not turned his good steed around, like the bright falcon the horse flew, and did not touch the ground. He soon approached the city. The Tsar and his retinue and No Not's own wife all ran down from the balcony to meet him, but No Not covered his face. Let no one recognize me, the Tsar spoke to him thus. Let no one recognize me, the Tsar spoke to him thus. Brave young knight, of what birth are you? Of what father and mother? And who has sent you to aid us? From what cities? I know not what gifts to give you. What not rewards? Welcome to our palace. The good knight answered, I shall not eat your bread, nor do I need your words. He rode beyond the city into the green thicket, unsaddled his horse, and let him go free. He removed his steel armor, his iron coat of mail, put his accoutrements away in their hiding place for the time being, and went home. When he came to his dwelling, he donned his old clothes and lay down to sleep on the stove. His young wife rushed to him and said, "Ah, No Not, my husband dear, you know nothing, for you have heard nothing. From the thicket a young warrior rode forth. He cried in a shrill voice, so that all the citizens were frightened. He jumped over these white stone walls and the corner towers into the open field, where stood a host of troops and the mounted guard, and they had hardly time to make room for him. He blew into a loud trumpet. The Saracen knight heard it and turned his steed about. They rode toward each other and clashed together like storm clouds. Their maces met and broke. Only the staffs remained in their hands. They clashed for the second time. They thrust their spears together, and the spears bent to their handles. They clashed for the third time, fought with swords, and the Saracen knight fell on the damp earth, and the young warrior jumped from the saddle onto his mighty chest, cut open his white body, searched for his fiery heart, and cut his rash head off his shoulders, lifted it on his long spear, and rode into the open field. Ah, you foolish woman, you don't know the ways of men, nor the ways of beasts in the dark forest. There are no such heroes in the white world. Ha ha! Tricking your own wife, are you? Shame, shame, shame. Although I can't remember his name. It starts with a V, I think. Meanwhile, the Tsar's son-in-law came forth from the woods and the thicket, met in the open field, assembled their host of troops and their mounted guard, and led them into the city. There were bells tolled, the regiments beat their drums, played their trumpets, and sang their songs. Overjoyed, the Tsar quickly opened the gates for them, let the host of troops and the mounted guard into the city, treated the soldiers to wine in all the taverns and inns, and gave a great feast for all the good folk. For 6 whole weeks they feasted. Everyone drank and ate his fill. Everyone in the city was drunken and gay. Only No Not, the Tsar's youngest son-in-law, did not enjoy this celebration. No one knew of his part in the affair, nor of the gay burden he had borne. So he said to his wife, "My beloved wife, unloved by her father, go and ask the Tsar for a cup of green wine with a piece of ham for me to eat." The princess went to her father's throne, came near to him, curtsied low, looked straight at him, and spoke out boldly. "My father, my sovereign, I beg your favor. Give my husband and your son-in-law, No Not the simpleton, a cup of new wine to drink and a piece of ham to eat." The Tsar answered, "Water does not flow under a resting stone. Your husband and our son-in-law, when we were in distress, fled to the country. He was a laughing-stock to all, and now when we are victorious, he has returned and lies on the stove. If only, my beloved daughter, you had married a knight who could have ridden the enemy host. Then we would have been pleased and you would not have been offended. But since the things are the way they are, you must be satisfied with the remnants when the feast is over. The Tsar's daughter replied, It is not given to all as it is eldest son-in-law to hide in the dark woods at the hour of battle and to rush back to the feast to drink and be... I'm going to start that a bit again. It is not given to all, as it is to your eldest son-in-law, to hide in the dark woods at the hour of battle, and to rush back to the feast to drink and be gay when the battle is over. Is it fitting that my husband and I should lick the plates after them? The feast was not yet over when a speedy messenger arrived in the Saracen kingdom. Straightway he came to the other two mighty champions and announced the disaster. A young warrior rode forth, he said, and slew your brother, whose body lies on the field. His hot blood was shed, and all his host of troops and his mounted guards were taken captive. The brother champions became angry, speedily mounted their steeds, donned their steel armor and their coats of iron mail, and stood up their warlike arms, their steel swords, battle maces, sharp sabres, and long spears, and set out on their way. Ahead of them they sent a messenger to the Tsar, bearing the following letter: Surrender the knight who shed our brother's blood. If you refuse, we shall cut down all your troops with the sword, set your capital city on fire, take your people captive, and give you over to a cruel death, despite your great age. The messenger arrived in the Tsar's palace and handed this letter to the Tsar, who took it, unsealed it, and read it, and then his nimble legs collapsed under him. His white hands trembled, and his bright eyes, could not see, for burning tears flowed from them. That's not something a man does. Men don't cry. Just kidding. Men cry all the time. I've done it. The Tsar took thought. He sent couriers out in all directions to summon his counselors, generals, and highest officers, and questioned everyone, humble and great, about the hero who had conquered the Saracen knight. No one knew who he was. The higher ranks referred the question to the middle ranks, the middle ranks referred it to the lower ranks, and from the lower ranks there was no answer. So the Tsar sent the messenger back without an answer. The Saracen champions approached and began to lay waste cities and villages and to set them on fire. Oh, nosy, no goodsy. Yes, what a mouthful indeed, Megan. I agree. And let's see, it looks like we've got some likes. Yes, some likes on the video. Great to see that. Happy so many people are here watching and enjoying themselves. Don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube. Don't forget to join the Storytime Facebook group if you have not already. And don't forget to share this so that others may partake as well. Continuing on. Where was I? Yes, there I was. The Saracen champions approached and began to lay waste to cities and villages and to set them on fire. No, not lay on the stove, his fiery heart boiling with rage, and spoke thus to his wife: My beloved wife, unloved by her father, come to the country with me. Life here has become uncomfortable. The Tsar's daughter answered, I will not go to the country. I would rather die here. No Not came down from the stove and said, sighing heavily, Farewell, my beloved wife. If your father is killed, you will not remain alive either. He dressed in peasant clothes, put on a cap on his head, took a stick in his hand, and went out and looked around, trying not to be seen. The Tsar noticed him from the balcony. What is the matter with this simpleton? He said. He wants to run away, but he does not realize that if anything happens, every member of our family will be ferreted out. The eldest son-in-law stood beside him, thinking how they might show their valor. Father, our sovereign, assemble a host of troops and the mounted guard. We shall help you in your need. The Tsar set about assembling the army and organized regiments. His son-in-law summoned their own troops and marched to the field of battle. The Saracen champions rushed on these forward regiments, smote them terribly with swords, and trampled twice as many with their steeds. Blood flowed in rivers. The moans of the wounded resounded. No Not heard them, rushed to their help, came to a high hill, shouted a hero's shout, and whistled a mighty whistle. At his call, the good steed came running from the open field. As he ran, he stumbled. "Ah, you carcass for wolves, you bag of weeds!" cried No Not. "Why do you stumble? Do you smell misfortune?" The good steed answered, "There will be blood on both the horse and the master." No Not put on his horse a bridle, saddle cloths, blankets, and a German saddle. He tightened the 12 saddle girths and put the 13th on the horse's chest. All the girths were of white Persian silk, the buckles of red Arabian gold, the clasps of steel from far-off lands, not for the sake of beauty, but for heroic strength. For silk does not tear, steel does not bend, and red gold does not rust. And now, my friends, another illustration, a very artsy depiction of battle. At least I think that's what it is. Here it is. Here's the illustration for you. Tell me if you think I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's an artsy illustration. And once again, don't forget to comment if you would like a shout out. Moving forward, he accoutered his steed. Yes, accoutered. Then began to accouter himself. He donned the knight's garment and the steel armor, took the steel shield and the battle mace in his hand, hooked the long, strong spear to his legs, the sharp saber to his waist, and the steel sword behind him. Then he mounted his good steed, put his nimble feet into the German stirrups, took a silken riding crop, and lashed his steed on his slender flanks, cutting his skin. The steed flew into a passion, rose from the damp earth, higher than the standing trees, lower only than the moving clouds. He jumped from mountain to mountain, straddling rivers and lakes with his legs. Wow, that's a lot. Sweeping through marshes with his tail. From his mouth a flame streamed, from his nostrils sparks flew, from his ears curling smoke rolled out. Beneath his hooves enormous clumps of earth were dug up and underground springs gushed forth. No Not shouted a mighty shout, whistled a mighty whistle, and the water in the lakes surged forth, mixing with the yellow sand. Old oaks shook, bending their tops to the ground. In the open field the Saracen knight sat on his horse, firm as a heap of hay. He stood, his steed flew like a falcon without touching the damp earth, and the knight himself boasted that he would swallow No Not whole. That would be quite a feat. Swallowing whole a man riding a horse whose legs straddle rivers and such. That is something I'd like to see. Manly. When the two knights met, No Not's horse said, "Well, master, bend your head over my mane. Perhaps you will be saved." No Not had no sooner lowered his head than the Saracen hero swung his sword, wounded No Not's left arm, and cut off his horse's left ear. At the same time, No Not thrust his spear into the Saracen knight's chest, below the neck, and turned him over like a sheaf of corn. The Saracen knight fell on the damp earth, lay there and wallowed in his hot blood. Soon the host of troops moved up. The mounted guard galloped forth, and No Not rode on his good steed to the Tsar's palace and shouted in a loud voice, "My good people, do not let me die in vain. Stop my hot blood from flowing." All the Tsar's retinue rushed from the balcony, and the princess, No Not's wife, was the first to reach him. With her own handkerchief she bandaged his left arm, but she failed to recognize her husband, for he was wiping the sweat from his brow, thus hiding his face. "Hello, Shaith. Hello, Shay. Good to see you. Glad you have joined in as well." Do. No Not rode to his hut, left his horse without tying him, entered the hall, fell on the floor, and covered his face with his hand. The Tsar knew nothing. He stood on the balcony and watched his son-in-law finishing the battle. But No Not's wife approached the hut and beheld the hero's steed with full accoutrement at the entrance, and the hero himself lying in the hall. She hurried home and told her father everything. Straightway the Tsar went to the hut with his retinue, opened the door, fell on his knees, and spoke kind words. "Tell us, good knight, of what family and tribe are you? What is your name? What is your father's name?" No Not answered, "Ah, my God-given father and sovereign, do you not recognize me? You have always called me a simpleton." Then all recognized him and paid him homage as a mighty hero. And the eldest sons-in-law, as soon as they heard of this triumph, packed up their belongings and went with their wives to their own homes. No Not soon recovered from his wounds, drank green wine, and made a great feast for all. And after the Tsar's death, he ascended the throne, and his life was long and happy. And that is the end of that story. But there is another image here, another illustration for you, and that it is. And there's also some writing in between the lines there that I did back when I had that class. So I think I should read it a little bit. Let's see. Feminism, key features. Speech shows power and enforces the patriarchy because women don't speak either from the beginning or as a punishment, whereas men can choose to be silent. Bettigheimer, women's speech is seen as nagging, casting spells, etc. The women who speak the most are witches. Then comes women stepmothers. Basically, negative personalities associate with dominance and overstepping the boundaries as far as women are concerned. According to Lieberman, women are okay. So this has nothing to do with the story. All right, well, skipping that then. I have to wonder where those notes came from. Oh, it has a note that says 251. I'm guessing it's another book, another Russian fairy tale book. I don't know where my other one is. It's somewhere. And I'm guessing that's the one I'm referencing with the page numbers. Because 251 in here. 251. Where's 251? Well, some of these I think are relevant and some are not. Anyway, now that I've read that story for you, it's time for one more story. This one is one of my own, like last night. And the way I figure, I wrote 3 versions of that one story. A Cool Spot in Hell. The second one I read last night was Sympathy for the Devil. And tonight's, let's see, where is it? I think I just called it Third Rewrite. Second rewrite. That's what it's called. Anyway, second rewrite. Yes. Yes, here we are. This one's called Lou and the Annoying Man. I think I'm going to read this one to you because might as well finish up that story from the 3 versions. Yes. So here we go. Lou and the Annoying Man. And then we will call it a night. How nice. Lou and the Annoying Man by Brett Picorni. God sent the devil to hell for all of eternity. He did the same to me. The only difference is that the devil was asking for it. That, and he's the devil. The Man. That was a quote by The Man. Hell was rather drab these days. Satan had gotten lazy and he let the floor crackle. It looked like one of those really dry deserts that didn't have sand, just a flat, broken landscape. For some reason, putting the souls to manual labor just wasn't doing it for him anymore. Old Lou had only been walking for a couple of Earth days, which in Hell time were several eternities. Already he had noticed changes in attitude. He could have sworn he heard a giggle. "Minion," said Lou, "who was laughing?" "There was no laughter, sir. Not a soul can smile in this desolation. Keep up the good work, sir." "Cut the shit. Who was laughing? I know I heard it." "Well, you see, sir, it's Lou. I've told you before, it's Lou." "Right, Lou. Well, you see, sir, there are some minions. Some of the minions were playing a round of Pin the Human on the Balrog when all of a sudden a firefly—" "A firefly? Here in Hell? That's impossible." "I tell you, Lou, it was a firefly. Actually, it looked more like a butterfly, but with flame wings and horns instead of antennae. But it was very, what's the word for it? It was, a man walked up to the demon and yelled, 'Pretty! I think it was pretty!'" "Pretty!" Lou's temper rose for the first time in ages. "That word is never to be used in Hell. Why are you circling me? I order you stop and tell me your punishment." "I can't stop," yelled the man. "If I stop, I can never walk again. That's my punishment. If I must walk forever for fear of never being able to do so again." "Then you can walk with me," said Lou in a menacing, calm voice. "Cool. A tour of Hell from Satan himself," the man yelled. "Are you taking suggestions? Because, I really wasn't a fan of the line. It was short, but it took me 6 years to get through." 6 years? Do you know how long that is per person?" "You're lucky," said Lou. Lucky, I spent 6 years in line waiting to get into hell. If I didn't know any better, I'd say the line was hell, and this is penance for having to suffer so badly. The man made an awkward yell and chuckle mix. That laugh, it was you, wasn't it? What were you laughing at? Answer me. So where's this lake of fire I keep hearing about? The devil kept walking with the man, regardless of the fact that he was extremely annoying. You see, Lou felt that the more annoyance a soul provided, the more creative he could be in turn with the added punishment. Likewise, the more he was put out of his way, the more justified his actions could be. Believe it or not, Lou still wished to be respected by God and felt that his actions must be justified lest God disapprove. They had only been walking for a few minutes in hell time, and already Lou had decided he could no longer stand the ranting about this and that, the constant questions to which no answers were needed because they were immediately followed by another question, or the way he kept saying, "you know," after every last sentence. Suddenly, a small rift opened up. The annoying man disappeared, and all Lou could hear was a quickly turning distant "ah!" Lou smiled. Lou laughed. Evilly. He knew that the annoying man would be back, that the fire rifts opened up near the barrier, and here's a little mark here, a little note near the barrier between heaven and hell. Contrary to popular belief, heaven and hell have a thin yet powerful barrier between them. Hell is not in the center of the earth, and heaven is not in the stars. Also, contrary to popular belief, there is a cold season in hell, debunking the popular phrase, "it will be a cold day in hell." So, back to where we were. He knew that the annoying man would be back, that the fire rifts opened up near the barrier, but at least he would be rid of him until some amount of eternities passed that made them cross paths by chance. And by chance, the rift happened to open at the barrier directly above him. The annoying man hit the surface of hell with a thud, as if the dry dirt were a thick cake of mud. He stood up, bent over at the waist, and began to brush off his knees before becoming as still as a portrait of a deer in headlights. "What's the matter?" asked Lou. "Oh, that's right. You can't walk anymore, can you?" "That's okay. I was getting tired of walking anyway, you know." Luke chuckled one more time before he walked away. It had been several eternities since Lou had seen the annoying man. He was starting to get bored again, and he thought he might see some misery as he had never seen it before. As far as he knew, Lou had never seen a man forced to sit in one spot for eternity. When he reached the annoying man, Lou was unsure of exactly what to think. The annoying man was standing straight up, hands high in the air, head facing the barrier. It was as if he was glowing. And he had what do you do? Oh, I have to find it again. It reloaded. Sorry about that. Mm-hmm. Here we are. When he reached the annoying man, Lou was unsure of exactly what to think. The annoying man was standing straight up, hands high in the air, head facing the barrier. It was as if he was glowing, and he had the largest grin on his face imaginable. What seems to be the problem here? "Lou," the man yelled, "it's been so long. It sure is good to see you again. I have so many questions to ask you." "I repeat myself, what seems to be the problem here?" "No problem. I'm perfectly fine," the annoying man smiled. "That's the problem. You should be in misery. Why are you not in misery? Why are you glowing? How long have you been this way?" The man began to think. "Well, Lou, a few days after you left, I started to notice a temperature change. I remember you saying something about winter not coming around for another several Earth lifetimes, so I knew that wasn't it. It was still warm, but it wasn't hot as hell, so to speak. Then I took a deep breath and I felt, well, love." Lou looked up and found the source of the love. There was a rift in the barrier. "Listen, guy, you're going to have to move. There's a rift in the barrier, and until I can figure out how to fix it, you can't stand here. You were sent to hell for a reason, you know." "I can't do that, Lou. It's my punishment, remember?" Lou cursed under his breath. "You may not be able to move, but Perhaps I can move you. Would you mind? Ah, you can try, but I've already had plenty of other souls attempt to take my place. But I am unlike any other soul. I know this place. I was among the originals. Lou tried using his thoughts to shift the underworld around him, as he normally would to change a less hellish aspect of hell. This did not work. He then tried to think the rift shut instead of the underworld as being shifted. Neither did this work. From this point, Lou moved to a less awe-inspiring measure and attempted to physically push the man, but the man's feet were as if encased in concrete. Lou then tried to hit the man, but his body turned as solid as stone. He tried with tremendous force to send him flying from his feet, but nothing would work. Lou made one last desperate attempt to rectify the situation. Lord, I need you now. I know that we have not spoken in quite some time, but I know you still watch over me. I know you still love me. Please speak to me now. God then appeared to Lou, Jesus at his right hand. Lucifer, my son, what is it that you need to talk about? Please, Father, just call me Lou. I will call you by the name given unto you by myself, said God. Okay, but can we please discuss this alone? My son is none other than myself in the flesh. You may speak to him as you would speak to me. Fine. I have this problem. There's a rift in the barrier, and I need it fixed. Why would you come to Dad for this problem? Said Jesus. You know the rules better than any of us. You break it, you fix it. I'm afraid he's right, Lucifer. You have caused the rift. You must find the way to fix it. Can you help me find the way? No, I cannot. You must do this on your own, for if you are to become like me, you must first discover the secret to perfection. In creating these places, I made no mistakes. Thus, I cannot fix something that is imperfect. However, in creating imperfection, you may find a way to undo your actions. With that, the conversation was finished. As Lou consulted the handbook he created upon being thrown into hell, he noticed that there were no chapters on barrier rifts. He also noticed, however, that there were no limitations set to the rules regarding who could participate in the 97 Secrets of Hell. The 97 Secrets of Hell were 97 tangible objects and false beings. In truth, there were many more than 97, but there was a specific combination of 97 that one could find at any given time. If one found all 97 secrets, one would be resurrected as the last of those secrets. The rules were simple. Find all 97 secrets and present them to Satan while keeping them a secret. The rules did not, however, say anything about Satan not being able to participate. A new kind of smile appeared on his face as Lou bid the annoying man adieu. He had just set out to find the first of 97 secrets. His life thus far had been eternal, but his journey had just begun. Well, isn't that an interesting twist? All right, everyone. That was Lou and the Annoying Man. Hello, Kathleen. I see you have joined. Glad to have you here. I also see a bunch of people who have been watching and such. I'm so glad everyone's here and has been watching and have been enjoying themselves. And for those of you who missed this and are catching it not live, that's okay. I love that you're watching this as well. Please, 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 if you're watching or if you have friends who you think would like to watch, make sure you like this video, subscribe, and share it with all your friends so they can like and subscribe as well. If you're on Facebook watching from there, make sure or if you would like to join there, make sure you join the Facebook group Storytime as run by Brett Picorni, and you can join in all the good times. Normally, we start at 10 p.m., 7 days a week, actually. 7 days a week, 10 p.m. On the nose, with the exception of tonight. We started at 11:20, a little later than usual. Usually, I'll let people know if I'm going to be late, and I told people I was going to be late tonight. I just didn't realize I wouldn't be starting until after 11. Regardless, we had a good time. At least I did, and I hope you did as well. We will resume with more Russian fairy tales next week, unless this one's really short, which it doesn't look like it is. No, it's not. It's short-ish, but it's not really short. So we will resume with the Russian fairy tales next week, when we read The Magic Shirt. The Magic Shirt. Yes, that sounds quite interesting, doesn't it? And I suppose I'll have to have some more stories for you. Yes, I have more. I have more. I'll find them for you. But anyway, hope you had a good time. And until next time, I bid you adieu. See you tomorrow, dear listeners, slash readers, slash viewers, however you want me to put it. Have a good night. You are welcome, Heather. You are most certainly welcome. Another toast to you! Delicious.